hello, and welcome to Gondor Calls for Ale, episode 76. This is, of course, a Middle-earth strategy battle games podcast, and I am your host, Sam Gallagher, and once again, I am joined by my brother, Ben.
Hello, dear listeners and viewers. Welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us today.
Welcome. I'm never quite sure what to say after you say welcome again. I don't quite have a good transition, but with that bumbled transition, Ben, we're gonna move on through because I think this is gonna be a fairly long episode today, and we have a short amount of time to get it edited and published. So we're gonna move into the first part of every Gondor Calls for Ale episode, and that is, of course, the ale. Ben, what are you drinking?
The first and perhaps most important part of every episode, Sam. For this episode, I have for myself from the Besiegers Brewing Company a Promise of Wealth Pale Ale. So delicious is this ale that friendly Dunland warrior models get +1 to wound within 6 inches of this delicious, tasty beverage. That's me, Sam. What about you for this episode?
Well, Ben, I'm having a Medicel Mead, which is, of course, the Helm Hammerhand of beers. That's nutty, foamy, with a surprisingly fruity note that lingers on the tongue.
Delicious. Packs a real punch, I'm sure.
Yes. All right, Ben. Well, do you want to keep on hastily moving on and tell me, tell the viewer, tell the listener what this episode is all about?
Oh, absolutely. This is a very exciting episode. We're back getting into our main meat and potatoes of content. We are going to be talking about some battle reports, not just from me this time, but from Sam as well. This episode is going to be covering our first 3 games of the Adepticon Grand Tournament. It was 6 games, so we got 3 games this episode, 3 games next episode from both Sam and I, and it's going to be an exciting time.
Yeah. So it's going to be kind of long. Both episodes are going to be long because it was a long several days of gaming with each episode containing 6 games, the first 3 and the last games, for the first 3 and the last 3 for each of us respectively. And to note that, especially given the crunch time that we've had to record and edit this episode, we are not going to be looking at any submissions from our Discord, the Army Spotlight or the Hobby Spotlight, where we generally go through and take some pictures of people's hobby progress or some army lists they've submitted and talk about those. We don't want to get this into a super long episode. That will, of course, be returning, and if you're interested in having any of your models or lists or ideas featured on the podcast, definitely consider joining our Discord. There's an invite link wherever you're listening to or viewing this episode, and you can share any of the stuff before we record. We usually put a message out asking for people to share lists, to share models that we can share on the podcast. So I think without any further ado, should we go into the armies that we were playing for this event, Ben?
Absolutely, Sam. Let's dive on in. Here is my army list. 700 points this year at Adepticon. I have the Besiegers of the Hornburg. That's right, I'm taking my slow grow army to Adepticon. So we are led, of course, by Wolf, the High Lord of the Hill Tribes. In his warband, there are 4 Hill Tribesmen with Flaming Brand, 5 with bow, and 9 with spear. Next, we've got General Targ. He's got 3 Hill Tribesmen with Flaming Brand, 3 with bow, and 6 with spear. Next, we have a Hill Tribes Chieftain. He has 2 Hill Tribesmen with Flaming Brand and Light Shield. And I'll have you know, Sam, they did use those shields. He's also got 2 Hill Tribesmen with bow and 4 Hill Tribesmen with spear. And next, we have another Hill Tribes captain. In his warband is 1 Hill Tribesman with Flaming Brand, 1 with bow, and 3 with spear. And last, but most certainly not least, we have Shank and Rot, the Orc Scavengers, who are, of course, accompanied by the fearsome Snow Troll. That's me, Sam. 50 models, 11 bows, 12 might, although only 9 of it is for Dunland, because 3 of it's for Mordor.
Yeah. And what do you get for being the Besiegers of the Hornburg?
What do I get for being the Besiegers of the Hornburg? All right, so Wolf has to charge all the time, regardless of who is in his range. If he can charge, he must charge. But he gets to, once per game, issue a free challenge against the enemy's general, regardless of their heroic tier, which is pretty nice. Additionally, my Hill Tribes warriors have been promised wealth. While they are within range of an objective, they get +1 to wound, which is very nice. And heroic actions and standfasts are not shared between Shank, Rot, and the Hill Tribes factions. They're sort of like red alliances.
Well, that's not a thing anymore. So if you're new, it means they don't share heroic actions. There you go.
Heroic actions or standfasts? No. All right, Sam, that's my army list. So tell me all about yours.
All right. Well, I'm playing the Defenders of the Hornburg, an objectively cooler army because it's got Helm Hammerhand. So in this army, we have Helm Hammerhand, Wraith of the Hornburg in Warband 1 by himself, for he can't lead any models. In Warband 2 and leading the army, we have Hera, the Bride of Death. She, of course, has a shield. She's got 1 Warrior of Rohan with banner, 6 Warriors of Rohan with shield, and 10 Warriors of Rohan with throwing spears and shield. In Warband 3, we've got Olwyn, Shield Maiden of Rohan, and she has a horse. In her warband, there are 6 Warriors of Rohan and 6 Riders of Rohan for 699 points, 32 models, 6 bows because the riders come with them, and only 8 might, only 5 of which can be used for anyone but Helm.
Interesting, Sam. Interesting. You're playing 1 point down, I see, obviously, why you didn't come home in top place.
Yeah, and then what I get for being this army is Helm can't lead troops and he can never be the leader. I get to re-roll 1s when making strikes, and my infantry count as dominant 2, or any infantry model counts as dominant 2, so that includes Olwen, which is pretty cool if she dismounts. Helm and Hera, of course, are higher dominant than that for being the leader, and Helm's dominant 4, and then if Helm ever kills a monster or hero at the start of the end phase, anyone within 6 inches of him has to take a courage test or make a full move away from him. It may be directly away. Alas, that only came up once in my game, so I got very excited about it and then promptly forgot to do it in the end phase. So,
Classic. Oh, good stuff, Sam. I'm excited to hear all about your games. I've heard some about them, of course, but excited to hear the full battle reports. Should we dive on into round 1?
I think we should.
All right, so for round 1, we were playing To the Death.
All right, and I believe you will be talking about it first, so I will read through the scenario. I'm pretty sure Ben does this on purpose. If you are viewing, you can see the very sweet deployment map. If you are listening, I will both get your box and describe it to you. They're just 12-inch up deployment zones, pretty standard here. We have a game that lasts until one army has been reduced to 25% of its starting number. We've got victory points. You score 1 victory point if the enemy general was wounded during the game. If the enemy general has been wounded and only has 1 wound remaining, instead you score 3. If the enemy general has been removed as a casualty, instead you score 5. You score 3 victory points if the enemy army is broken at the end of the game. If the enemy army is broken and yours is not, instead you score 5 victory points. You score 2 victory points if your opponent has no banners remaining at the end of the game. If they didn't start with a banner, you automatically score this. You score 1 victory point if your army has at least 1 banner remaining at the end of the game. If you have more banners remaining than your opponent, instead you score 2. You score 3 victory points if the enemy army has been reduced to 25% of its starting number. You score 1 victory point for each enemy hero that has been removed as a casualty to a maximum of 3.
All right, Sam. So for round 1, I was playing against Pat, and he had brought the Rise of the Necromancer, which is, of course, led by the Necromancer. Then he had the Keeper of the Dungeons, a Hunter Orc Captain on foot, a Hunter Orc Captain on Felwarg, and a whole pile of Hunter Orcs. He had 8 of them with bows and 1 giant spider. And we were playing on this interesting little desert town board, which I think was a pretty good table. Had some spots to put archers on buildings. Pat ended up deploying first, and he put 4 of his archers up on this building. And I said, "Aha! Putting archers in a building, I see. I too can put archers in a building." So I put 5 of my archers up on a building as well. And the remainder of my archers were in front of this. You can see this archway in the center of the table. If for those of you who are not viewing on YouTube, this building is 2 sets of stairs that come up on either side with a nice big, like 6-inch wide archway in the middle. So the rest of my archers are in my deployment zone with a nice shooting lane through that building. And I'm going to go through the first part of this game fairly quickly. Pat took priority on the first 3 turns and gave it to me, and he just stood in his corner with his whole army, with the exception of a couple of his Felwargs and his Hunter Orc Captain on Warg, rode out to come sort of harry my flanks a little bit, I think was his intention. On the second turn of the game, I got 3 shooting kills, killing 3 of his archers, which meant that now I really have the shooting superiority. My bows are range 24 inches. We both got strength 2. His are only range 18, and now he's got 5 bows to my 11. So I'm really controlling the board at this point. And yeah, these are the guys. They, getting the kills on his bows was pretty key. His captain is running big loops around my army. I'm in a big clump, sort of pushing forwards up the middle of the board. And I think around round 4, he manages to get into combat and kill a couple of guys with his captain. I take priority on the next turn and decided to give it to him because I wanted to bait that Hunter Orc captain into my backlines a little bit more while pushing the rest of my army up. Really, I was actually kind of happy in some ways that he was sitting in his backfield because it let me put all of my heroes outside a line of sight and outside a range of the Necromancer because there was this nice building for me to go hide behind while I pushed my troops forwards. So on turn 5, we get a combat from that Hunter Orc captain, burns a point of might, and kills 4 of my archers in the backfield. I had unloaded into him in the shooting phase that turn, but failed to do anything. Which are the first real casualties I've taken so far, and I think I've been pipping like 1 or 2 kills with my bows a turn, so I'm outnumbering him by heaps. His Hunter Orc, one of his captains is all the way out on the flank, and the rest of his army is boxed up in the corner with my guys pushing on in, and we finally get into the exciting stuff on turn 6. He takes priority, pushes up his army, which then frees me up to respond. The Necromancer throws throws 1 will on a Chill Soul and kills a guy, and another will on a compel on some random guy that fails to go off. I think he wanted to pull someone forwards and get the Keeper of the Dungeons in and call a heroic combat or something. But now, we've sort of, the lines are going to lock next turn. We're going to have some real combat. I win the roll-off. Give him priority. He moves first, and he made a little bit of a mistake. If you're looking at the video now, you can see where his spider is, and there's just enough room for me to get guys in there. The Necromancer throws an Instill Fear, which makes all of my guys, what's the rule, Sam? Fearful. Thank you. Makes them all fearful. But I had enough guys outside of range of the Instill Fear bubble that I was just able to charge his spider. I got 3 guys into base contact with the spider and got them with spear supports. The spiders only fight 2, so I was just gonna stab that spider this turn was my goal, which we did in the combat phase. And very excitingly in the combat phase, Wolf has moved within 6 inches of the Necromancer, and I declare my first heroic challenge of the tournament, and the Necromancer accepts my heroic challenge. We get some more combats this turn. I take 4 casualties and kill 2, one of whom is the spider, which is very exciting just to have that piece removed from the table. I take the next priority and give it to myself. I've set up my sneaky maneuver here, Sam. I've challenged the Necromancer. Move Wolf first while he still can't move into the Necromancer because there's a press of bodies in the way, and then move all the hill tribesmen out of the way so that the Necromancer is going first. I should mention too that we actually had a move off this turn between one of my captains and one of his captains, and I won that move off. His captain is behind the Necromancer too, which means he can't get anywhere useful. He could have just moved the captain back and then the Necromancer would have had to retreat. But instead he moved the captain up and the Necromancer charged into Wolf. Then Shank and Rot and the Troll go into the Necromancer and we get some exciting combats. Unfortunately, I lose the first roll-off between Wolf and the Necromancer, but the Necromancer fails to do anything. He was striking the Troll. He should have been striking Wolf, but he was striking against the Troll and didn't get any wounds on the Troll, which is pretty nice. I was pretty okay with that. The Keeper of the Dungeons calls a heroic combat, kills a bunch of guys. I lose 6 guys this turn and only inflict 2 casualties. We get into turn 9, which is the final turn of the game. We get another move off. Pat takes priority. We get another move off. I win the move off. We re-engage with the Necromancer. The Necromancer once again wins the roll-off. I surround... Sorry, before we get into the fight with the Necromancer, his Hunter Orc captain that's been harrying my flanks has come in. I surround it with Hill Tribesmen, kill it this turn. The keeper manages to get into Rot off of another heroic combat and kills Rot this turn. The necromancer wins his fight with Wolf, needs 3s to wound on 3 dice, gets 2 wounds through, and Wolf passes both of his fate, so is unscathed and doesn't die from the death touch of the necromancer. And this game ends here on time. I think if it had kept going, it probably would have gone to me, because I, at this point, was just surrounding his army, trapping Hunter Orcs, and the kill tallies were getting to be pretty even in the last 2 turns as far as taking casualties and inflicting casualties, which is never a place you want to be in when you're outnumbered. He was also pretty much out of might, and I had might for days on my army. And this one ends on a 3-all tie. We both killed a hero for 1 victory point, and both of us scored 2 victory points because the other person didn't have a banner. A good game to start, although not a terribly interesting one, I must say.
All right.
All right, Sam, that is my game 1. Tell me all about yours.
All right, so for my game 1, I was playing Dietrich. He was playing the Besieges of Helm's Deep, I think. Assault on Helm's Deep. So he had 3 Uruk-hai captains. One, of course, is the super captain who gets an extra attack and wound. He had 2 regular captains, and he had an assault ballista, as well as a bomb team, and I believe 4 crossbows. That was sort of his, and then just a bunch of tin cans. We also played in the desert. I think this is the same board I started on last year at Adepticon, or certainly very similar. And we'll just get into it. So the first turn, I took priority, or I won the roll and made Dietrich go first. He basically stood exactly where he was, and I plowed forwards. I did realize in this game, deploying 12 inches away in his whole game, he was just going to sit there and shoot me, which was kind of funny because 4 crossbows isn't that scary. No. And 1 ballista shot, while scary, is not necessarily, it's not necessarily a force that you're like, I'm going to lose a bunch of models coming in on shooting. I think if I were him, I would have pushed up to the middle line to be outside the 12 with the ballista, so the ballista was always shooting, and then try and blow a bunch of people up with the bomb team. So first turn, I just moved forwards. He didn't do anything with shooting and missed a shot with the ballista. Turn 2, he won priority and made me go first. I just continued pushing forwards, and there was, again, no shooting casualties. Turn 3 went to me, and again, I made him go first, and he basically didn't move. And I pushed forwards. I'm sending Olwyn and all of my cavalry to the right-hand flank to try and loop around these tents and potentially get in the ballista. And there's bomb teams on that side as well, so sort of just make him have a choice of where things were going to go. This time he hits with the ballista and rolls a 5 on the scatter. He's just shooting at Hera and spends the might to go to a 6. So wounds Hera. I pass a fate, but I am pushed 6 inches or something directly back, which was a bit of a bummer. What I should have done was I should have put her with a bunch of people in front, because I think it would stop her from moving, but I'm not actually sure if that's true with piercing shot. So might not have mattered. Anyway, so Hera is now prone and way far back out of my army, which is a bit annoying. Turn 4 goes to me. Again, I make him go first, and same stuff, just sits there. I move forwards, no shooting casualties. Turn 5 goes to Dietrich. He makes me go first. We continue to push forwards. At this point, my flanking force is pretty close to his right-hand flank, left hand on my side, and he is able to kill a model with his crossbows. Turn 5... Is
that your first casualty after 5 turns of being shot at?
No, he's killed 2 models.
2 models, okay.
So on the turn he wounded Terror, he killed a model as well. Turn 5 goes to him. Same basic thing. At this point, we're and he makes me go first. I stay out of 6 of the Uruk-hai. Yeah, I think I stay out of 6. Or maybe I just move forwards and he decides not to charge me. And he kills another model with shooting. So I've now lost 3 models, which is a little unfortunate because I think we were about even numbers going in, and I've lost a bunch of shooting. Turns out that is a theme for this event. Turn 6 goes to me. I decide to take it because I'm able to get enough models into combat that it seemed kind of worth it. I think this is actually turn 7, but it doesn't matter. I charge into combat and pull. Basically, I consider pulling my right-hand flank away from his crossbows and making him loop round, but I charged them into a group that I could reach that was still on that side, sort of try and sell them. make them die slowly. We get into the combat phase where Helm, of course, gets a free combat. Oh no, this is turn 6. This is turn 6. Helm gets a free combat, and he's moved his bomb over. I should say, in his turn, he moves his bomb over towards Olwyn, and it's in range of like Olwyn and a couple of and like two or three of my other riders, and I'm like, because I really hummed and heard, but I decided I'd just send Helm straight in because I assumed he was just going to move up and try and blow up Helm. But I decided to send Helm straight in with enough of my models around him that would tie up enough of his Uruk-hai, and because every Uruk-hai he kills with his bomb is worth significantly more than a Rohan warrior dying. Obviously, Helm dying wouldn't be ideal, but I thought, I'll at least make it a choice for him. So he decides to send it towards Olwyn, and a bunch of my cavalry. So Helm calls a free heroic combat. The captain on his that's over with the bomb team calls a heroic combat, as does another one of his captains on the right hand flank, trying to mop up my 4 guys. I didn't mark down who the combat goes to Dietrich, and his captain by the ballista goes first, kills the one rider he's in, and I was like, oh shit, he's gonna send him into Olwyn, tie Olwyn up, like basically then Olwyn's probably not gonna get that combat off, because my plan was Olwyn was fighting with, it was like Olwyn and a rider against one Uruk-hai, and then he peeled the rider, so it was Olwyn against one Uruk-hai, and I was like, well, at the very least I can run her away from the bomb, like she can survive and he can, because combats go before the bomb goes off now. But he decided to put his captain into another one of my riders, so we did Olwyn's combat. She had to spend her last point of might to win the combat, but I'm able to kill the Uruk-hai, and I have enough move, and there's a gap that I was able to ride round and ride into combat with the Berserker, with the Flaming Brand. So the bomb was against this turn, so that ended up working well for me. Helm had to spend 2 might to win his combat, and it was definitely worth doing because he was fighting 2 Uruk-hai, each backed up by like 3 pikes or something. So had he lost, he probably would have died. But I did manage to, I think I killed both the Uruk-hai I was in combat with and piled into the pikes. And his captain killed some of my models on the right-hand flank. By the end of this turn, we each killed 7 models.
Wow.
So pretty brutal, but, like I said, each Uruk-hai is worth a little bit more than each one of my Rohan warriors, so I will take it. Turn 7 goes to Dietrich, and he decides to keep it. I think Olwyn's out of might, and Hera's can't really get into combat. So can you go to the next slide, please, Ben?
Yeah, sure. Sorry.
This was much later, so I stopped taking pictures for a while.
What happens in the middle of the game? It's really hard to take pictures of that mid-game.
So goes to him. We do some charging. Hera calls a combat, and his general is in combat. I think he ends up fighting Helm here. Okay. Or he's just fighting enough regular guys that he spends 2 might to win his combat, so he's now out of might. I think Hera's combat doesn't. Maybe she kills like a couple of models, but I only kill 2 models and lose 4 this turn, so a little more as expected. Turn 8 goes to me, and I keep it. He calls a move with his Uruk-hai captain, who's on the flank by Olwyn. And I call a move with Hera. The move goes to me. I'm able to tie up that captain and get Hera in, or get Olwyn into his siege veteran, which is worth points in this game.
Oh, of course, yeah, he's a hero.
And Helm, so I stop his move. Helm charges in. So we get combat. Helm calls a free combat, and I kill. I think Helm's fighting one of his captains at this point. I kill 7 models and don't lose a single one this turn. I kill both a siege veteran and an Uruk-hai captain. Turn 9 goes to me. I keep priority. I think Helm and a friend go into his general. And Olwyn and a rider are fighting his other captain. And I win both of those fights, and I managed to do 2 wounds to the Uruk-hai general this turn with Helm. Isn't enough to kill him, but he does fail his point of fate, so he's down to 1 wound.
He's 3 wounds?
Yeah, because he gets +1 for the.
Okay,
leader.
gotcha. And you
Uh,
didn't roll 3 wounds on the mighty blow because mighty blow is just 2 wounds, right?
yeah, and he.
Gotcha.
So he passed. Anyway, whatever. He takes 2 wounds. He might not be fighting Helm. It doesn't. It's irrelevant.
Sure.
He doesn't die this turn. The other captain passes his fate. Turn 10 goes to Dietrich. He takes it. I move with Hera. I think at this point he is out of might, so the move goes to me. Helm charges into his general again. We get some fighting. Helm has to spend a point of might. He calls a combat, has to spend a point of might to win the combat against the Uruk-hai leader, but kills him, then charges in some other Uruk-hai. There may be more. I don't know if there are any more pictures, Ben, but we can.
No.
Okay. And Hera or Olwyn loses her fight against the Uruk-hai captain, who is down to 1 wound. She fails a fate and then passes the second one. Basically, we have one more turn where Helm kills some more models, and I sort of stopped tracking. And this game ended up being a major win to me. I believe it was 12-3.
Nice. Sounds like Helm Hammerhand had to spend some resources here and there, but showed up punching Uruk-hai.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of might as well. In a game like this, right, he doesn't have any strike, and, Helm can't use his might for moves, so you just blow them all to win the fight or cause wounds, I guess.
Yeah, for sure.
Generally, I'll take the.
I guess he's calling free combat, so what else are you spending them on exactly? Yeah.
Right.
I see what you mean about the ballista. Had he pushed forwards even 6 inches, that thing could have fired for at least
basically,
a turn.
we spent the entire game fighting within 12 inches of the ballista. So even which I mean, he pulled his models off to fight. He didn't leave them sitting there doing nothing. But
sure.
And being able to stop that bomb from going off was pretty huge. So
yeah. Absolutely.
A good game and a major victory to the forces of the defenders of the Hornburg.
Yes, indeed. All right, Sam, onwards into round 2. Shall I read through the scenario this time?
You probably should.
All right. For round 2, we played Domination.
The deployment map.
So there we have a beautiful deployment map, 24 inches, with a central objective. There are 5 objectives in this scenario. The players roll a d6. High player chooses to place an objective first. The objectives have to be at least 6 inches away from a board edge and 12 inches away from another objective. The game ends when one force has been reduced to 25% of its starting number. You score 1 victory point if you have more models within 3 inches of an objective marker than your opponent. You score 2 victory points if you have twice as many models within 3 inches than your opponent. If your opponent has no models within 3 inches of the objective, you instead score 3 victory points. 1 victory point for wounding the enemy general, 2 if you kill them, 1 victory point for breaking the enemy army, 3 if they are broken and you are not. All right, Sam. So for my domination round 2, I was facing against the Riders of Eomer. We were playing in some woodlands, which we did not call the tree bases wooded ground. I had no intention of hiding in the woods anyway. And I was feeling pretty good about this mission because I'm getting +1 to wound the Rohan people, Rohan warriors and Eomer, and +2 if they happen to be within 3 inches of an objective. So I was feeling pretty good about this one. He had 22 models, so I outnumbered him by more than 2 to 1. And, so Riders of Eomer, he's just got Eomer and Gandalf, no captains in this army as well. We deploy, he sets down his army outside of 6 inches. I get to choose priority for the first turn and decide to take it and just push my whole army forwards, trying to get over that center objective, get on the other side of it, and really command the center. We're playing on this cool wooded board. You've got some trees, you've got some rocks, and this big old dead Mumakil, which really makes for a nice flanking anchor piece for my battle line. And as I move forwards, I sort of spread my warriors out so that we're going to minimize casualties, hopefully, when the cavalry charge comes. Only so many of them are going to get into base contact with me. My front line of guys is definitely going to die. But rather than packing my whole line base to base and losing lots and lots of guys, we're just going to lose that front line, was my hope. And Matt charged right on in on turn 1. He thought about backing up and shooting, but elected not to. He just charged in, and good on him. He even declared that the sun had risen this turn. Dawn had come, and Gandalf and Eomer were riding.
Dawn had come early?
Yeah. It was going to outshine my flaming brands. Gandalf attempts to make himself terrifying with a free dice and fails. In the combat phase, Éomer calls a free heroic combat, slays a bunch of guys. I managed to win 2 of my fights and kill 2 of the Rohirrim, which is pretty good, but I take 9 casualties this turn from that initial first charge, so pretty heavy. We get into turn 2, where Matt takes pride. Sorry, we say again?
Did you call a challenge here? It looks like you could if you wanted into Éomer.
I could have, but didn't.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I haven't marked down on the next turn. I guess I could have done it this turn.
It doesn't matter.
That may have been where he ended up after declaring his heroic combat, and he might have been just out when he started the declaration. So Matt takes turn 2 priority, gives himself priority, and of course one of my captains calls a move, and Gandalf calls a move as well. The move off goes to me, which is great. It's what we want to see here, and we just also General Targ, who is out on the other flank. There was a flank. General Targ also called a move because I need to go first in 2 places, basically. Or at least try to go first in the center and definitely go first on the flank because he has no might over there. So I win the move off. My captain goes first in the center. We cancel Gandalf's heroic move. We tie up a bunch of the horsemen. General Targ moves next on the other flank. Tie up a bunch of horsemen on that flank. And in the combat phase, Shank calls a heroic combat. Éomer calls Éomer doesn't call heroic combat. Gandalf calls the combat this time. Éomer calls a strike. And Wolf does, in fact, Sam, this turn, challenge Éomer. Éomer declines the challenge, and we get into heroic combats. Gandalf's heroic combat goes first. And they, of course, win their heroic combat against the handful of hill tribes I moved into them. And Éomer charges into my troll. We get Shank's heroic combat next. I thought about using Shank to peel Éomer off the troll, but decided not to. Shank goes in, gets a couple of kills, doesn't find any rings. So we get the big fight off between Éomer and my troll. Éomer wins the fight. He's charged the troll. He outfights me. He's struck up to be higher than the troll's fight 6. Rolls his dice. He's got 4 dice looking for 5s to wound, and rolls 1 5 and a 6. So Guthwine goes off, gets to make a second strike, and gets the final wound on the troll with the exploding 6 from his magic sword, and kills my troll this turn, which was a little gutting to lose my troll, but super, super, super cool to see Éomer's sword go off in that fashion. Elsewhere in the combat phase, I managed to kill 5 of the riders this turn, but take a total of 8 casualties this turn. So we've taken some heavy hits in the first 2 turns. Onwards into turn 3, Matt once again takes priority and keeps it. I call another move off, another move with Targ, and another move with my captain. So one of my captains is out. Targ is also out of might. Éomer calls a counter move, and the move off goes to me. So once again, we re-engage all the riders. A couple more of them countercharge this turn. In the combat phase, Shank calls another combat. This is to propel the troll into... not to propel the troll, to propel Rot into Éomer. Rot calls a heroic strength, and Wolf calls a strike. Éomer spends his last point of might to strike as well. We get the strike off between Éomer and Wolf. Wolf goes to 9. Éomer only goes to 8. We win the fight and do enough wounds to kill Éomer. Wolf did not get the final wound. Matt saved Éomer's fate for saving the wounds against Wolf, so Wolf's not getting any might back. But Rot did get the kill, but alas, Éomer was not carrying a ring of power either. And I got another 5 kills this turn and only lost 4 hill tribesmen. So it's pushing my way. Winning both of those move offs has definitely been pretty key. And turn 4, Matt once again wins priority, takes priority. I call a move. He's now out of might, and we pretty much mop it up this turn. I lose another 3 guys. Wolf strikes off against Gandalf, kills Gandalf, and I take another 3 casualties, kill another 3, and win this one. It ends when he is quartered, which is this turn. It goes to me 12-4. Super fun game. Definitely brutal to be killing Rohirrim on 4s and 3s with your regular warriors. I think I had one guy in the combat with Aemir as well, one like regular hill tribesman, and I think because he was near an objective, he was also getting +2 to wound, so he was wounding Aemir on 4s. It was pretty ridiculous.
It is definitely brutal for sure.
And just winning all the move offs, or both the move offs against the cavalry force, really just sealed it for him.
I think
so. That was my game too. One I felt pretty confident about, and one that definitely went my way.
Yeah, I think winning move offs can actually be, or certainly multiple of them in a row, can decide many a game. So in my game too, I was playing Reese. He was a great opponent. It was a very fun game. He was playing the Halls of Thranduil, so of course he had Thranduil just on foot. He had Legolas and Tariel. And
Legolas, boo. Just kidding.
Some number of Elven bows and a bunch of Mirkwood warriors. I had a very frank conversation with him in the beginning of just like, hey man, if you're gonna, like, are you gonna stand? Because he basically just deployed far back and stood in a clump. And I was like, are you just gonna stand here and shoot me? Or are you gonna back up? Because I'll just hide behind buildings. Like, because there were enough, we were playing on the Rohan village. Mm-hmm. He was like, well, I'm not gonna like not shoot, but I'm not gonna run away from you, man. Like, so I was like, all right. So I just pushed all my models forwards, which I certainly appreciated that he was on, and he was honest. He didn't back away. And, obviously, I'm not saying like you shouldn't take your shooting if you've taken the 8 bows or whatever it is, but. So he killed one of my models on the first turn. So I got priority. I gave it to him. He killed a model with shooting, and I was able to kill a model with shooting as well. I think I was in range of some throwing spears. Turn 2 goes to Reese. He gives it to me. I think I push up. I get some models in combat. I think both Helm and Hera are unable to get into combat this turn. I lose a total of 5 models this turn and only kill 3 in response. But I think we had the same number of models again. Like Helm being 180 points, he is a little rough and not being able to
for sure.
Troops. So turn 3 goes to me. I take priority this turn, and Reese calls a move with Legolas. I call a move with Olwyn, and the move goes to me. We charge in. Hera goes into a couple. Helm goes into a couple. And as does Olwyn. I believe Legolas takes some shots at Olwyn, or takes his one shot at Olwyn's horse. I take my Horse Lord save. I spend 2 fate on Horse Lords, but do keep the horse and 1 fate. Helm obviously calls a combat, has to spend 1 to win his combat. And Hera also has to spend 1 to win her fight. Or doesn't have to, but I choose to. Tariel, he calls a combat, but I kill 6 models and lose 3. I have 4 models on my right-hand flank that are fighting about 6 elves, and in this turn he kills 2 of them. But then for basically the rest of the game, my 2 guys managed to hold up these 6 elves, and it was pretty wild.
Awesome! I love it when that shit happens in Lord of the Rings. Like no matter what side of it you're on, it's just kind of epic to see.
So turn 4 goes to me as well, and I take priority. Reese decides to call a move again with Legolas, and I call a move with Olwyn's Last Might. Unfortunately, this one goes to Reese. We get some combat going on. And Thranduil finally gets into combat and has to spend a point of might to win his fight. Hera loses her fight and fails 2 fate. And I only lose 2 models. Tariel spends a point of might to get a kill as well, so he's down to like 1 point of might on Legolas and Tariel and 2 with Thranduil. I managed to kill 3 models and only lose 2. Turn 5 goes to Reese, and he obviously decides to keep it at this point. I decide it's not worth the fight, or not worth calling a move. And we get into some combat, and I think here Helm because he gets charged. Helm calls a combat with one from his store because I really just need to kill some models. And is that right? I think yeah. I think he's like fighting one model. He wins his fight, but then rolls 3. I had that he spent a point of might to kill a model. So it must have been the following term that my notes for. But then just basically like not much happens here. I lose 6 models and only kill 2. So basically Helm and Hera just aren't showing up this game and aren't getting the kills they really need them to do. And then on the final turn of the game, I'm assuming this is the last picture I took. Yeah, so no, is this the last one?
Yes.
So this is a little bit before the final turn of the game, but in the final turn of the game, basically what ends up happening is the priority goes to me. I keep it. We have a move off between Legolas and Hera. The move goes to him. He's able to get Legolas, Thranduil, and a bunch of warriors into Hera. He gets Tariel into a couple more of my models. He isn't able to tag Helm with the move, so Helm charges in, calls a free heroic combat, and Hera calls a strike, because we're using her last point of might. Thranduil can't strike in response, because of Hera's the bride, the warrior of death, or whatever it's called. Warrior bride, that's the name of the rule. So Helm calls a combat and wins the fight, and then against one model, he needs 4s to wound. He successfully rolls 3 2s. Kill, which is really annoying. And then we get into the combat that matters, where Hera is trapped, and she rolls a 1 on her strike, so she's a tied fight against stupid elves. We both roll the 6, which is like extra disappointing. And then, of course, the roll off, he rolls a 3. So he gets it on the Elven Blade and kills Hera. So it ends up being a major loss, 6-12 for me. It's a real shame because we were basically fighting over one objective here. We each had 2 objectives. I think he still would have won. So we each had 2 objectives, and one I think was neither of us had. And we were fighting over this one. And what ended up happening was he had more models within range, but not by a huge. I think I had not, because Helm's worth 4 and each of my guys are worth like 2 apiece. So it would have been really close. And had Helm killed his models and gone into some others and potentially killed or peeled them at the very least, and like Ket was able to keep Hera alive, I think I actually might have held that objective, because she's then worth 3, which is cancelling his 3 from Thranduil and Helm's 4. Anyway, I should say in that turn Tariel failed her combat as well, so it wasn't just like all one-sided.
Sure.
And then, but yeah, so it was a good game, and a bit unfortunate to lose, because Helm and Hera just really didn't show up, and especially losing, because there were a couple of failed combats by Helm, which was disappointing when you need 4s, fighting one model, and again, Hera striking, on a 3+, she would have won the fight, and I just would have killed a couple of warriors. Maybe evened it out. But a good game. Reese was a great opponent. He like flew in on a red eye, and like basically like walked off the plane and onto the tabletop. So
wow,
props to him for doing that. But yeah, that was my round 3.
Round 2, surely.
Yes, round 2.
Onwards then into round 3, where we played Hold Ground. You want to give us a run through of Hold Ground, Sam?
Sure do. If you want to move us to the deployment, Matt.
Absolutely.
All right, Hold Ground. We have an objective in the center of the board, and it is a Maelstrom mission. We have a game that lasts until one force has been broken, and then on 1 or 2, it may suddenly end. We have some victory points. You score 4 victory points if you have more models within 6 inches of the objective than your opponent. If you have twice as many models within 6 inches of the objective than your opponent, instead you score 8. If you have 3 times as many models within 6 inches of the objective, or you are the only player to have models within 6 inches of the objective, instead you score 12. You score 1 victory point if the enemy general was wounded during the game. If the enemy general was removed as a casualty, instead you score 3. You score 1 victory point if the enemy army is broken at the end of the game. If the enemy army is broken and yours is not, instead you score 3 victory points. You score 2 victory points if your opponent has no banners remaining at the end of the game.
All right, so I was playing against Josh, and Josh had brought the Defenders of Helm's Deep, led, of course, by Theoden King. He had a bunch of Rohirrim in his warband, one of whom had a banner. Then he's got Aragorn with a bunch more Rohirrim in his warband. These two warbands are pretty much 50-50 throwing spears and sword and shield Rohirrim warriors. And finally, we've got Legolas with 11 Galathrim in his warband, all of whom have elf bows. And as confident as I felt about my previous game, I did not feel good about this game because I had figured out what table I was playing on and seen that there was little to no terrain for me to hide behind. And I was looking at 11 elf bows and Legolas wounding me on 4s. So I was getting ready to take a lot of casualties from shooting this game, and I was not disappointed. Josh was a great opponent. He came in with a pretty cool display board for his army as well. And we did have a good time. So I'm going to dive right on into it. He won the roll-off, so I moved onto the table first. Wolf rolled a 1. General Targ rolled a 5. My first captain rolled another 1, so he's hanging out with Wolf. That's good. My second captain rolled another 5, so he comes on with Targ. And Shank rolls a 5 as well, so he also comes on with Targ and my captain. So a pretty ideal Maelstrom deployment for me. Theoden rolls a 3, so I put him in the corner of the board, but on the side of the table where Josh was standing. And then Aragorn rolled a 2, so I had to make Josh walk around the other side of the board because we had to split up Theoden and Aragorn. So Aragorn comes in on the other corner, and then Legolas rolls a 3, and I was getting ready to put him and his warband behind my army so that I could ambush them. And Josh wisely spent the point of might on Legolas to turn it into a 4 and to come in the middle of the northern board edge. You can see them in the background of this picture. The elves are painted in red. They're a little grayed out, and they're getting ready to inflict some damage. As they walk on this turn, one of them, probably Legolas, opens fire and gets first blood, killing a single hillman. We get a repeat for the next turn, where Josh takes first turn priority, or chooses to give priority to me. I call a heroic march with my captain, and the whole army runs forwards into the only terrain feature anywhere near the center of the board, which is this burned out building. Going to get me a few in the ways over there. Aragorn also calls a free march this turn and is running towards the center of the board. Wolf gets a 4, comes in on the southern board edge. My captain rolls a 3 and turns it into a 4 to come in on the southern board edge next to Wolf, opposite from Legolas. And we're trying to jump on Aragorn's warband at this point. We're trying to get my whole army on top of Aragorn's warband, see if we can kill that. But the arrows will stop flying once we start fighting. In the shooting phase, I take 6 casualties from the elf bows this turn. And we get into turn 3, where I win priority and decide to take it because I want to push a warband up the battlefield past Aragorn's warband in an attempt to sort of wall them off from the center of the board. I call another march with the captain behind Wolf so that Wolf and that captain can catch up as well. Aragorn doesn't call a march this turn. His warband sort of pulls back out of the way. You can see them off in the bottom right-hand corner of this image. Left-hand corner of this image. And Theoden's warband and Legolas's warband. Legolas, some of the elves are moving, some of them are standing still. I think actually this turn they stood still as well. And I took another 6 shooting casualties this turn from those elf bows. Turn 4 is much the same. I take priority, keep it, to keep Aragorn from reuniting with Theoden. There's this wood that's sort of between the two warbands, or this sort of rocky terrain feature. I take only 3 shooting casualties this turn. Josh had started moving his elves forwards, wants to get them into the middle of the board, and I think he was a little shocked at how much of my army was melting away to his volleys of fire. Enraged by the death of their comrades, my own hill tribesmen open up. At this point, my bows have stopped moving towards the center. They are opening up into Aragorn's warband, and I got 3 lucky kills this turn. I think 6 guys managed to get 3 kills in return. So finally doing some damage back to my opponent. Turn 5 goes to me, and I give it to him. And we're sort of just pushing towards the middle of the board here. Legolas machine guns 3 shots at Wolf. with some in the ways, goes through some in the ways. Wolf has to spend 2 points of fate this turn, which is not great. I take another 5 shooting casualties, but we do get some combat this turn where I get 2 kills and lose my first Hillman in combat this turn. And there it is, the elves pushing forwards, finally getting some combat. I take turn 6 priority, give it to myself. Josh does not call any moves, so we get right on into it. Wolf charges in, my captain's charging into combat. We're near the objectives. We're finding some Rohan guys. In the combat phase, Aragorn calls a free heroic combat, and Wolf calls a heroic combat. Wolf goes first, manages to kill 2 warriors of Rohan, and then ride on in and slay another 2. My Aragorn, of course, wins his combat, kills a couple of hill guys, no problem. And in as a sort of an overview of the combat phase, I managed to kill 7 models this turn. And lose another 5 in combat, and I think 1 or 2 from a couple of throwing spears as well. But getting to kill 7 of those Rohirrim felt really good. The 6-inch bubble of +1 to wound from the center objective was definitely starting to help me. Turn 7, Josh wins priority and chooses to take it. So I call a move with my captain and a move with Shank. The captain needs to go fight the Rohirrim, and Shank wants to be propelling the troll towards the elves. And yeah, Josh, again, does not call any counter moves. So we charge right on in. The lines relock. Wolf calls another heroic combat. Targ calls a heroic combat. Him and my captain are both fighting one Rohan guy. We just need to sort of catch up and get more kills here. Aragorn calls a heroic combat. And Rot calls a heroic combat. So we've got heroic combats galore this turn. Aragorn's combat goes first. He kills a couple of guys. Then we get Wolf's heroic combat. Wolf biffs his fight and doesn't manage to kill even win his first fight, let alone the second round of guys. And he also takes a wound this turn. Unfortunate. General Targ has to spend a point of might to win his combat. But when he does, him and the captain go into 2 guys each, and they both manage to kill both of those guys, which was like a few moment. So between the 2 of them, they got 5 kills this turn, which were my only kills because Rot also biffed his heroic combat and failed to get a kill there as well. So I got 5 kills this turn, but also took 5 casualties. Turn 8 goes to me. We get a move off between my remaining captain and Theoden. The move off goes to Theoden. The elves pile in on my troll. Legolas strikes up this turn. Wins the fight against the troll, but only, despite having the troll trapped and surrounded, only manages to inflict 2 wounds. And it's not a very killy turn. We only inflict 2 casualties on each other this turn, which brings us into the final turn. It goes to me. Lines re-engage. Aragorn calls a heroic combat this turn, charges on into Wolf and kills him. Shank calls a heroic combat, and Legolas calls a strike. Shank wins his heroic combat and peels Legolas out of combat with the troll. The troll charges into Legolas, because at this point, I think I'd broken him last turn. We were both broken, so it didn't really matter whether the troll got more kills or vengeance, and I really wanted to kill Legolas. So the troll barges into Legolas, has fight 7. Legolas only strikes up to 7, rolls a 1 on his strike. I win the roll-off, and the troll put 3 wounds on Legolas. He passes all of his fate, but Shank and Rot had been in that heroic combat. They had charged into Legolas, and Rot gets the final kill on Legolas, inflicting 3 wounds all by himself. Legolas was not married, not carrying any rings, but definitely pretty nice to have Rot bring him down. So this was a 10-1 loss to me, or for me, I suppose. A brutal game, one that I think could have gone very differently if I hadn't taken something like 20 shooting casualties before the lines locked.
Yeah.
If there had been any sort of terrain feature for me to hide behind, I think it could have been a very different game. But Josh was a really, really great opponent. He didn't actually have any reason to engage me. He absolutely could have just sat there and shot me completely off the board. But after 2 turns, he started moving up his elves. And after, 3 turns, 4 turns, the elves were fighting too. So,
I mean, I would say that he needs to. depending how quickly he's inflicting casualties, right?
That's true.
I guess you could walk at him, but like if you're just going to stand there and shoot, you just stand there and shoot and lay a character down behind that thing within 6 inches of the terrain and just hope the game ends while you're
That's
still
true.
holding it, you know. But
yeah, that's true.
But it doesn't sound like that was the only reason he did it for sure.
No,
I do think it's an interesting thing. Like the boards looked great at Adepticon, but they were pretty light as far as, or some of them were like fine and had a decent amount of blocking line of sight, and some of them were like really flat and didn't have much. And I don't know whether it's, I don't know why, whether it's just the armies that are out, whether it's the scenarios that are out, but there were a lot of elves with a lot of bows at that event, and you really need. And like I understand a third of the table or whatever it is that GW recommends is like hard to do if you're doing a big tournament. But given that they didn't sell out and there were a couple of unused tables on like every row, I would have gone through and used some of that terrain and just filled the tables up because
and even if you're at an event, I've been thinking about this. If you're at an event and you've got like, I'm limited for terrain on my board, I think what you want to do is sort of pack the terrain more towards the center of the table.
Yeah.
And a lot of the tables, if you look at our images, a lot of the tables at Adepticon are sort of set with like the buildings off in the four corners and then maybe some scatter terrain around, but it leaves the center very wide and open.
Yeah.
It's almost more like you're fighting a rank and flank sort of fantasy battle game with big infantry blocks rather than the skirmish game.
Yeah.
Which definitely leaves shooting armies plenty of opportunities just to machine gun people down.
Yeah, for sure. Which is just like not. I don't think anyone overly enjoys it.
No, I mean Josh definitely didn't enjoy machine gunning me. And like I think at first, sure, getting some at first, and then he was like, "Oh my god, half his army is dead to my bows. Like this is ridiculous."
And like obviously you're playing an army with defense 3, so
yeah, absolutely,
that's not going to be the case. But it is. I think as well, right? It's part of the thing is that a lot of people, when they've got those things, especially if they're looking for 5s or 6s anyway, will just be like, "I'll put everything at your hero within the ways." And then that A, slows the game down because they got to take a million in the ways, and B, feels like even worse if you're like, great, now my hero's finally hitting combat and has like no fate left. So, you know, so just it's nice to have tables where you have like a couple of big things that you can like really hide in. And then if somebody's like, well, I'm just going to sit and shoot you, then you're like, well, I'm just going to hide behind this terrain and we can have a draw, I guess, you know?
Right, exactly.
All right, well, shall we move along home?
Yes, let's move along into your game 3, Sam. Give me those deets.
All right, Ben. So game 3, I was playing against Brian. Brian was a great opponent. This was a fun game. He was playing the Rangers of Mirkwood army, which was led by Legolas. He had Tariel, then he had Dwalin the Dwarf, Glowin the Dwarf, Ori the Dwarf, and Dory the Dwarf. So it's a pretty neat list. The kind of like the Mordor contingent in your army, the dwarves and elves can't benefit from each other's heroic actions or standfasts, which is really neat. The dwarves get to reroll fate, which is kind of cool.
Whoa.
And Legolas gets like knife fighter and some other, and you get hatred spiders or something. Anyway, so this was the first game I was outnumbering because I believe he only had like 16 Mirkwood elves because they're quite expensive and a bucket load of heroes. I won the first turn priority and obviously made Brian go first. He rolled a 1 for Legolas, who didn't arrive. He rolled a 2 for Tariel, and I just, put a sort of behind a building. Oh, I should say we were playing on sort of like a Osculiath ruin thing, behind a building on his side. He rolled a 2 for Dwalin, and I just put him on the other corner on the same side. He rolled, because all the dwarves roll separately, I should say as well. Glowing rolled a 5, and he basically put him so like if Dwalin was on the north corner, Glowing was on the west corner, basically as close as they could be. Ori rolled a 3, and that's what you can see a picture here, is I just put him on the opposite side of the board to Glowing, and just in the center. And then Dory rolled a 4, and I think showed up with the other dwarves as well. And then I rolled, and Hera rolled a 3. And I decided not to spend a point of might with her. Actually, I might have rolled Helm. I rolled Helm first, and Helm rolled a 6 and popped up right next to Ori, obviously. And then Hera rolled a 3, and he put her in basically the center of my board edge, or the board edge I was standing up against. And Olwen rolled a 5 and showed up on the other side of Ori. There was no shooting kills this turn. Ori took a slingshot at Helm, which was a little worrying because if he'd hit, it would have done an auto wound. So, but no shooting.
His slingshot just wounds if it hits?
If it rolls a 6, sorry. Rolls a 6.
Okay.
Turn 2 goes to me. I take it. And Helm and 3 guys charge into Ori. A couple of my riders flank towards Tariel's warband, and basically everyone else crunches towards the middle again. I'm like, I really need some might here. Legolas arrives this turn and arrives in such a way that he can like shoot down the flank of Hera's warband, which makes sense. And everyone else stays put or adjusts a little bit to try and get some shots. And most of Olwen's force moves through this. There was this big bridge with big arches and moves through it. I lose 2 models to shooting this turn, and I call a combat for free with Helm, and I absolutely crush Ori's skull. As we were joking, Helm was feeding him cabbages because Ori doesn't like green food. So Helm were fists of cabbages. So killed Ori, so that was cool, and then just basically with the combat, threw them 6 inches towards the middle. Turn 3 goes to me. I let Brian have it just because I kind of want to see if he's going to move and it makes it easier to hide. But I'm basically just rushing the center. I'm able to charge 2 riders into an alpha piece on the flank that was part of Tariel's warband. We get some shooting in this turn, and I lose another 3 models to shooting. But I do successfully kill one of those elves, and I think the other one's shielded because they can shield with their knives. And then turn 4 goes to Brian wins. He makes me go, and I'm basically just rushing the center with everyone. And my 1 cavalry model that charges into another random elf on the flank. And he does some moving and just adjusting. The dwarves are piling towards the center pretty happily. And the elves are just standing and getting shots where they can, and I lose a model and I kill another elf this turn, whether it was with a throwing spear. It probably wasn't. It was probably that cavalry that charged.
Not to interrupt your flow again, but this is like what I was talking about. There's some good buildings on here, but the center of the board is just wide open,
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, not to drag that conversation back.
Basically, you can see Hera's warband is the one closest to the bottom of the screen, and she's just making a beeline as quickly as possible to get. And Legolas's warband is essentially just directly parallel to hers, and I'm just making a beeline to get to hide, because Legolas had a bigger warband just to hide behind that one building. So turn 5 goes to Brian. He gives it to me again. I think in the last turn I peeked Olwen and some riders out from behind the building to get some charges. So I charge in, and Brian takes a bunch of shots at Helm at this point, and he manages to do a wound with Helm, who fails his fate, and is wounded from shooting, so that's a bummer. Tariel calls a combat, I think kills one of my riders, and then goes into another one, and I lose a total of 3 models this turn and only kill 1. Turn 5 goes to me, and I let Brian take it, I believe, just to sort of see where he's going to go. This time, Dwalin, I think the dwarves have sort of arrived. You can go to the next picture and sort of see what we've got. Oh, how about, is there another one?
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, so at this point, Dwalin's arrived and is fighting somebody. Anyway, I don't particularly remember. Dwalin calls a combat, and I think loses. I think he's fighting like a rider or something. Oh no, that's right. He's fighting Olwen, and Legolas shoots at Olwen's horse. I take use a point of fate and pass my horse lord. Dwalin calls a combat against Olwen, which puts him down to 1 might, and then rolls like a 4 high. Olwen rolls a 4 as well, and spends her 2 points of might to win. Nice. And Dwalin passes his fate.
You spent 1 point of might, and then he spent his.
What?
Never mind. Sorry.
No,
I was just wondering if
I rolled a 4. I spent 2 might to go to a 6. He called a combat. Only his one can't win the fight.
Gotcha.
I win. He passes his fate. Turn 7 goes to me, or it goes to Brian, and he takes it. I call a move with Hera. He calls a move with somebody. With Dory, that's right. He calls a move with Dory, and it goes to him. We get some combats at this point in time. Helm is able to charge into Dory. So actually, I think it's this turn here that we're looking at. I call a free combat with Helm. Legolas calls a combat. Tauriel calls a combat. And I believe the combat goes to me because Legolas is just fighting one warrior. Hera calls a strike because I was concerned. I think she was fighting Glowin anyway, so that would take me higher, and I was worried if Legolas charged in, that it might stop him from charging into Hera. Combat goes to me. Helm and his friends kill Dory, and then he charges into Dwalin. And then Tauriel's combat goes off, and I think she wins, kills a rider, and then charges basically back into a random warrior. And then Legolas combat goes, and I think he just went into 2 warriors.
Sure, just gonna get some kills.
Yeah, Hera, I don't remember if she did anything particularly special. Glowin had to spend 2 points of might to win the fight, so I don't know who he was fighting. But Helm won against, we each rolled a 5, I think, with Dwalin and Helm. We each spent a point of might. So Dwalin spent it first, made me burn a point of might, but I did then absolutely pummel Dwalin and killed him in the same turn. So I killed Dwalin and Dory in the same turn. And then next turn, Brian got priority and kept it, and Tauriel went into Olwyn, I believe.
Okay.
Helm went into Tauriel, as did 2 other warriors that were hanging out around there. I had sort of forgotten about her Blade Mistress rule, and she struck. I decided not to strike with Helm. Because that was her last point of might, and I was like, I'm down to 2 might with Helm, so fingers crossed he rolls like a 5 and I can outfight her.
Yeah.
And
what does the Blade Mistress do?
She gets an extra attack for each model past the first in combat with her. So she rolled 6 dice and didn't get a 6, and I did get the 6, and then just crushed Tauriel's skull with Helm.
Wow,
and
lucky.
Charges back into the middle and kills some more people. Then the final turn goes to me, and he's out of might at this point, I think, basically. Helm charges into Legolas, who's like made a beeline for the middle. I make sure I've got a bunch of people in the middle. And I think Hera goes into Glowin and strikes. Legolas strikes, Helm strikes. I win the fight against Glowin, but don't kill him. I win the fight against Legolas with Helm. I think Legolas is trapped. Oh no, I think I just put Helm and Olwyn into Legolas because I was like, I'm not going to do the same thing where you get a million extra dice.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember if I struck higher or if he didn't roll the 6, but I did win, knocked him over because I got the cavalry charge, and then Helm punched Legolas to death, and killed him on the last turn of the game, which we then rolled, and I believe it ended. Or it did end, and it was an 18-3 victory where Helm killed every single hero I killed. So Helm killed 5 of them.
Awesome.
The only hero he didn't kill was Glowin, and if the game had kept going, he would have bounced back and smushed Glowin.
Smushed Glowin as well. When your hands are hammers, Sam, every head's a nail.
Yeah, I mean, and he's killing like regular elves on 3s. I think, because he's strength 6.
It occurred to me that Olwyn loves fighting the knife-fighting elves. Charge into 2 of them, they don't get their attack bonus for being outnumbered, and then they can only wound her on 6s. It's pretty saucy.
Yeah, I don't actually think that rule ever came into effect. Most of the time she was fighting a hero or like one model. But she's
Sure.
absolutely amazing. 3 attacks, 4 on the charge is super. It's just so good. 8
Yeah, it
strikes
really
at
is.
strength 4 as a cavalry model is like no joke. So yeah, a great game, absolutely great game, and I missed the opportunity to say that very clearly. Brian was not using Baron of Dice, Ben, because of course our official sponsor would have provided him with some perfectly balanced resin dice with no micro bubbles that, as we say, are guaranteed to roll 6s at least some of the time, and Tariel clearly would have been one of those times.
Absolutely,
If you would like some of those dice, you can find a link in the description of wherever you're listening to or viewing this episode, as well as a promo code to get a little discount on those 6s. That promo code is, of course, capital G, capital C, capital A. Helps him out, helps us out, so definitely consider getting yourself some fancy Lord of the Rings dice.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you're really interested in supporting the show, do consider hopping over to our Patreon. We are producing extra episodes as well as giving away some cool free Gondor Calls for Ale Baron of Dice to our supporters. And for those of you who are already supporting us, we do appreciate you very much. Thank you so much. You are really what helps keep the lights on here at Gondor Calls for Ale.
Yeah. So thank you for listening and thank you for viewing episode 76. Ben, unless there's anything you want to say, I think we can close up this episode.
No, we will be back with our remaining 3 games from the Adepticon Grand Tournament, and then more episodes to come about doubles and other things in the future.
Until next time. Thank you for listening to Gondor Calls for Ale. We hope you have enjoyed this episode. We, at Gondor Calls for Ale, are officially sponsored by the Baron of Dice, the producer of premium wargaming dice. These beautifully hand-swirled resin dice have no micro bubbles and are therefore perfectly balanced. With over 3,000 variants and unique designs, nearly every tabletop gaming system is represented. So check out the description of this episode for a link and a discount code. Go buy yourself some new dice and let the good times roll. We at Gondor Calls for Ale are not associated with Games Workshop, New Line Cinema, or the Tolkien Estate. We hope we have not misrepresented or offended anyone. These recordings are strictly recollections of games we've played and are not commentaries on the character or competence of our opponents. They are intended purely for entertainment, and we hope they will be taken as such. You can find us on Patreon, see the link in the description. Supporting Gondor Calls for Ale there helps us continue to produce these episodes. You can find us on Instagram at Gondor_calls_for_ale. Feel free to send us a message there. Or on Facebook as Gondor Calls for Ale, another great place to send us a message. Or you can send us an email at gondorcallsforale@gmail.com. As Boromir, Captain of the White Tower, once said, remember today, listener, today this episode was good.